like I've talked with some neurology specialists, and I've read some like, I don't know, like some like Deepak Chopra books and everything. And there's so much that a lot of people still don't really understand with
Mm.
respect to neurology and how like the brain works and everything. But for those people who are in tune with this, like what can you tell us about performance neurotraining? Why is this important? Kind of dive into that rabbit hole.
Well, because the brain and our quantified field, because again, we are biophoton energy, we are electrical energy, that's all we are. And so it's dictating everything. And so your brain, your thought process around things, stimulating your nervous system, that expression, the energetic expression, the vibratory pattern of all of your organ cells, actions, it's pretty much everything. And that's where we start digging into quantum physics. And so I never knew much about quantum physics until I started realizing, like, okay, so we have physics and understanding all of that, having an exercise science background, and like, okay, yeah, so you do this and you get this result. Like, we know that in like hard science. But when it came to the quantum physics aspect of things, you're just like, wow, okay, so this quantified field of atoms outside of us is dictating everything within us. And so it was a little bit to make that shift of grasping that concept, because I think that we like certainty. And with quantum physics, there's not a lot of certainty, meaning that we can try to push our body physically to do something, but if we are not engaging the energy system first, it will not occur. And a lot of people think this manifestation, we're creating our own reality, where is like woo woo or not reality, but it's actually, that is our reality. You can sit here all day and try to get your body to do a certain thing, but if our quantified field is not there, if the energy into the universe, the connection, the feedback loop is not set, it will not occur. And so then kind of we get into like sports psychology, right? So mindset is everything. Well, that's what that is. It is mindset. You have to believe. The nocebo and placebo effect is so powerful. So if we believe that something isn't going to occur, it won't occur. If we believe something will occur, we have an opportunity for it to occur. And then if we have our mental and physical and supramental, the energy field, on board with that, then it can potentially occur. And when it comes to competition, it's that if you have any athlete sitting here doubting themselves that they will not succeed, they will not succeed. When it starts to come to other individuals with as great a potential as you, and the top in the world, like I've worked with a lot of U.S. ski teamers and snowboarders, so top 3 slots at a World Cup or the Olympics, it's that you are in competition with someone that is at your frequency level, at your ability, at your mental and physical ability, and then the quantified field becomes everything. And so it's like, yes, there are some people who are better than you, so you can't completely think your way past them or manifest your way past them, but you do not have the opportunity to meet them or surpass them if not all of the energy is on board. Mental, physical, supramental energy plane, or that quantum physics. So I know it's still a little confusing, so I can pull back a little bit with performance neurotraining. It started off with just really understanding the altered consciousness trauma reprocessing techniques, and really understanding that our subconscious programming is set by age 7. So how we react and act nervous system wise to stimulus, to potential of threat, is already hardwired into us. And so we go from there, and then that is how we're acting and reacting throughout our lifetime. And so with that subconscious programming, it's if we've had a lot of mental and physical trauma, or even spiritual, so energetic kind of environmental trauma, we are already at a decrease in reaction time. We are already at a higher level of cortisol state, because we are constantly calling for our fight, flight, freeze mechanism, or triggering the amygdala, this little pea-sized organ in our brain that essentially is our fire alarm system and looking for danger, and then it will release cortisol, which is an inflammatory biomarker, when we feel that there is a threat, which is all a safety mechanism. So by age 7, and there's so much research now That's really cool. And I actually have my own training called Alpha Imprinting, where I've gotten to actually put in all of the new neuroscience and quantum physics research around that. We do know that by the time someone is even just in elementary school, that they already have a higher level of cortisol state from the subconscious programming by the age of 7 if they've had trauma in their background or high levels of stress. So it's really interesting to kind of look at this and think, hey, if you are going for athletic potential, reaching your highest level, there's absolutely no way until you get into that subconscious programming and reprocess, desensitize, and reimprint those memories and reset the nervous system so that you're not already at this higher level of cortisol, which of course is tearing down your strength and conditioning gains and inability to recover, right? And then also decreasing that reaction time. We don't discern between mental or physical trauma or that spiritual or energetic trauma or someone else's or secondary trauma, right? Our energy field goes out 25 feet. So anytime that we're in like a, competition perspective of like lacrosse, for instance, and one of your teammates right next to you goes down and tears their ACL, your energy is taking on their energy and it's ramping up your nervous system as if that was a trauma for you. And people don't want to believe this, but it's like, no, it's the quantified field. It is just, we cannot see this field because it's so quantified. It's so dispersed compared to our body, which is a tighter field of the atoms or whatever, right? So this is reality. And so you actually will sync up with their nervous system and it will reset yours as if that trauma happened to you. So it really matters who you're around. People are always saying that. It's like, yeah, their behaviors, their patterns, their lifestyle choices. It's like, yeah, but their energy as well. Their nervous system can be inhibiting yours. So within and around that, we react in that fight, flight, freeze mechanism, and it's a survival mechanism so that that doesn't occur again. We want to be ready, right? We want to be ready to be defensive to make sure that we don't get hurt again or that we can stop it or, theoretically we think we can stop it, but we really can't most of the time, trauma from occurring on us. But so every single time it resets the homeostasis to this higher hypervigilant, more cortisol, fight, flight, freezy trauma response, and it's very subconscious. And so what this starts to do and what we start to see on brain scans is it actually keeps us in this like huge beta brainwave is like really hypervigilance, hyperfocus, and then we have theta, which is rest and recovery, and in the middle we have that alpha flow state, and that's where we want to be, and that's our optimal recovery state. But what begins to happen is we start coming all the way up, all the way down, all the way up, all the way down, and then we can stay stuck on, as we'd say in a fight trauma response, and that's typically when you aren't sleeping, ruminating. A lot of times with athletes, especially your combat ones or like hockey or something, they'll get so angry that they kind of like disassociate and like will get in a fist fight and don't remember how they got there. So kind of staying stuck on in that fight trauma response. And so what we see when we reprocess, desensitize, and reimprint these past negative experiences and release the energy associated with the emotions stored within our fascia is that we will see this decrease. So it's a beta-theta ratio, so it gets lower, so we know that they're maintaining alpha more. As well as when we talk about mental health and wellness, it's the flexibility and the ability to recover quicker from being in a high beta, upset, ruminating, fight, flight, freezy state. So it's that mental flexibility, as they say. So that's mental fitness, right? So we want just like little peaks and to go right back into that alpha all the time. We also see regionally within the 18 areas of the brain with the electrodes that the reaction time will be enhanced when we reprocess and desensitize. And mostly because it's this, I met him in Brazil at this international conference. His name was Dr. Bruce Davis. He was a craniopath, chiropractor, traditionally trained in that, and then got into understanding the dural motor sheath around the brain and the spine, is that we actually tighten with trauma, and so it decreases our flexibility and our ability for movement, which is essentially reaction time also. So we become more stiff and more taut, as you'd say, with trauma. And so what we did when I first moved up from Colorado to work with him is we'd have the individual come in. We were working with a lot of head injuries, a lot of legal cases and so on around that, and he would have them bring up the experience in their mind of the car accident and their pain that they're currently in. check their range of motion, check their skeletal system, and kind of seeing how they were off. Then they'd come into my office. We'd work on the experience of the car accident, so reprocessing, desensitizing, and re-imprinting that experience. And they'd go back into his office, and he was able to get their body to make the effective changes, and it was increased range of motion and flexibility. And this was even before I had my brain scanning tool. And so then, like I was saying, with the brain scan, I used the WAVI QEEG brain scan. It was developed by a doctor in Colorado. He was the past U.S. ski team doc, as well as the Colorado Avalanche team doc. Very intelligent individual, teaches at the Onschwatz campus at University of Colorado. But this really cool device, it's actually like a health pre-brain nervous system health measure for any intervention you're doing, or just baseline screening for concussion, or just wanting to know if your brain is healthy at all, right? So what it does is it has this P300. And what that means is you will have your eyes shut and be ready to click a mouse, and you hear a ding in your ear, and it's how quickly you're clicking that mouse after you hear that ding. So it's that auditory reaction time, right? And so regionally, we look at the electrodes and where that time to respond is throughout the brain. And we want it under 300 milliseconds is ideal. And so what we've seen, and even just with one session of reprocessing a traumatic experience, that it will enhance it by up to 50%, this reaction time regionally throughout the brain. And it's like, you can't make this stuff up, right? Like, it's like, this is like real data that this reaction time is enhanced. And it's really cool to see. And even after, like, I've worked with retired athletes that came in that are concerned about CTE or developing Alzheimer's or something of that nature, and even just one session with them, it's like we will actually see the enhanced voltage, blood flow, reaction time in areas that clearly it looked like there had been like a concussion, because we were at like double the, nearly 600 milliseconds to respond in certain areas of the brain. So it really is that when we are going in there and releasing this trauma response on the brain and the body, we are enhancing that reaction time. We are decreasing that cortisol. We are restoring that blood flow. We are really getting someone into a less higher peaks and valleys and having that mental flexibility. So yeah, it's cool stuff. So that's the brain scanning stuff. That's the alpha imprinting, which is the altered consciousness trauma reprocessing technique, which I use sounds to drop someone in. We don't have to do psychedelics or any of that type of thing, because we never really know how someone's going to respond to those things. Those things are great, but not necessarily for athletes who are training and need to keep their body really clean, right? So, and then we have audiovisual entrainment, which stimulates our neuroocular system, but it also will enhance blood flow, increase heat shock protein. It does all sorts of interesting things in making areas of the brain fire. And I like to use the Mind Alive device. It's Dave Seeger's device out of Canada. And then we talk about photobiomodulation, which is the red and near-infrared light on the brain, which we know that it stimulates the mitochondria. We know that it stops the microglial overpriming, which microglial overpriming, the microglial are cleaning up the brain after an injury or just in general, and they start to become hyperactive and can actually harm the brain. So putting that on your head after a concussion, and really what we've seen with the literature and the past athletes and getting their brain healthy, is that we have to continually be putting it on the brain and the body because we will go back to that maladaptation. We used to think we could get someone to a really good place and scan their brain, everything looked great, and then stop the intervention. But just like exercise, just like eating healthy, sauna, all the things, we need to continue to do it. So that's been kind of a change since we first started using the photobiomodulation on reversing head injury, stroke, those types of issues. Yeah. So that's performance neurotraining.
That was great. That's the elevator pitch for it. What's interesting that I really like that you had said, you were along the lines of talking about Murphy's Law, that if you believe something can happen, it probably can happen. Where if you believe something cannot happen, it cannot happen. And that's Murphy's Law. And I love that, like, sort of law of the universe that they use within science. And that goes back to that idea you talked about, manifesting.
Mm-hmm.
I love that idea where people are like, oh, I'm going to manifest this. And it's like, well, you also have to have something to back it up. You can't just put it out into the universe of, I'm going to change the world, but if you're sitting on your couch and not doing anything, it's not going to work. And I do really respect and I love that idea. And I want to dive into that a little bit more of someone looking to raise their energy quite literally in order to get the outcomes that they want to get.
Yeah, and so there's a lot to that, right? So it's like the nocebo placebo effect, and we start looking at Joe Dispenza's work around the belief, the biology of, well, that's, yeah. Joe Dispenza's idea around like you really must believe something is going to occur, but you also have to put yourself in an optimal frequency. So when we think about, so these are like dynamics of like energy dynamics, and especially it's Dr. Ginger Bowler who taught me, I'm a certified light therapist, to like know how to utilize the light therapy devices appropriately, dosing, all that kind of stuff. Like there is real protocol and science to all this, right? People just kind of think like, oh, this is, it's like, no, like there's real principles here. But when we talk about light and darkness, right? So when we talk about, someone being very negative and swearing all the time and just that negative Nelly, that person that you're around that just kind of brings you down, you can feel it. They kind of make you sink into a hole. Nothing light can come from those things, right? And so if everything in life and life is light, we have to think of that with things. We want to up our vibration. We want to up our frequency. And they really talk about like when we look at like emotions and those types of things, it's like we have love and then we have enlightenment. Well, what does enlightenment mean? It means that we are at this optimal vibratory pattern. And so if we're anything from dark cannot shift to light. Light can shine on darkness. So we have to think of those principles, which is being light beings in general. And we really look at the studies that they've done on plants, right? Where they have the negativity playing all the time on this plant, or they have the positive, mantras or whatever playing on this plant, and this plant will just die, the one with the negativity. So we have to prepare our vessel, let's put it that way, to begin with, when we start looking at what we believe can happen. And a lot of people will, especially, we have our athletes that have had a lot of trauma or, negative things occur. So they're just like, oh, I'm resilient because of that. And they're very critical on themselves because, and this is kind of an interesting thing when you're working in sports psychology or the sports performance world of, our entire lives, we are given correction, right? We are given coaching on how to make ourselves better. And so over time, we begin to think that we need that negative feedback, essentially, or those corrections to become better. But we start to see a shift, it's about this age 17 where we really look at like internal and external resources to make us better in sports. And so that's when we really have to start to shift to internal resources, external before that. The coach's direction, the coach saying you need to do this, and you got to do this, and you need to correct this. And not saying that we don't necessarily need corrections there forward, but we actually need more positive reinforcement. And so if it's more internal, we have to literally start there every single day and telling ourselves what we're doing right and how well we're doing. And so a lot of athletes are like, oh my gosh, that's not being humble, da da da. It's like, well, this is your energy field. These are your cells. You either kill yourself, you're down in that hole, your vibratory pattern's this low, you're not going to be manifesting from there. You're not going to be creating this optimal performance over here. It's just not going to happen. You have to start building yourself up, essentially. And a lot of coaches just cringe when they hear this kind of thing because they want their athletes to stay humble. They want to maintain control. They want to be in control of their outcome. And it's an interesting dance because it's like, well, that's not really reality. It's like there should be this level of, if we're talking about that quantified field, the whole team should be in this really hyper, amazing, happy vibratory pattern going into things. And you'll see it with some teams, and they come in and win when the coach has this culture of this happy, this uplifted, they're just coming in, they're dancing, they're laughing, they're doing all these things, where the other team's just like, why aren't they serious? Why are they not focused? It's like actually being more focused is going to put you in that beta. It's going to slow down that reaction time. There's this thing called a trauma memory network. So anytime we're pulling on that cortisol, we are actually subconsciously going back through every single traumatic negative experience that's ever occurred in our lives and recruiting more of that cortisol and decreasing that reaction, or making the reaction time slower. There we go. So it's a really interesting, and all of this has been proven in science at this point in time. So it's really cool when we look at the brain and how we lay down memory and what's occurring and how we reconsolidate memory all the time. So it's really the opposite, and I wish that sports culture would just completely change into this empowerment, amazing, hyperactive, state, because also we know when we smile, when we laugh, when we whistle, we're dropping into alpha brainwave. So we're in optimal flow state. So it's always interesting. I'm always telling my athletes, like, I want you to smile and smile and smile, because it's going to confuse your competition, because they're going to be all scowl faced and like serious, and they're just going to think, whoa, what's up with them? Like, they're going to be intimidated. And so it's kind of interesting. But creating this optimal frequency to begin with, to be able to go there, and then having that frequency, that empowered, powerful feeling. Because that's the other thing too. So when we're manipulating and looking at memory networks, we bring up in the body the bad feeling from when you tore your ACL. We reprocess, fully imprint a positive experience associated with that, because we go back through the experience, have you say, okay, yeah, I'm feeling it in my gut when I, tripped and felt my ACL pop. Then I had to go, to the hospital. Then they did the surgery. The recovery sucked. I feel that bad feeling in my heart because it took me out of the game. And then you go into this, okay, but I'm feeling powerful right now. I've done this before. I've got this. I'm not going to get hurt. The doctor said I'm cleared. I'm ready to go. So you're feeling that powerful feeling. So then we start going into that visualization aspect of things, because we know in Stanford's first study about the visualization of people doing the bicep curl, and then both groups doing the bicep curl, and then the group that was visualizing doing a bicep curl, they made more gains, right? So then we start going into that visualization aspect of that powerful positive feeling. So if we've already set the tone of building ourselves up, cool, team culture of positivity and positive expectation, smile, laughing, getting ourselves staying in that alpha brainwave. Then we go into this visualization of, like you're saying, the Murphy's Law, or like, oh, okay, so I'm going to achieve this, conceive, believe, achieve. But we actually know too that even if we can't see ourselves doing it, we can put ourselves in the position of, say the top skier in the world, and you're trying to get there, you're about the fourth in line here. You are conceiving and believing and watching their videos, or knowing what they look like when they do it, and putting yourself in that position, how powerful that would feel. So this is all that manifestation, visualization, creation, and frequency that you're doing. But when it comes to, if you, have never skied a competition in your life, like you were saying, and you're like, oh, well, I'm going to be the top in the world, that doesn't make any sense. Because we still have, we want to come all the way back to physics and biology, that's, 90% about is like genetics, right? So, and we know that by about the age of 10. Oftentimes these parents think that they can push their kids into this submission around really aggressive training. The more training, the better. The more coaches, the more this, the that, the going and seeing the sports psychs and doing all these things. If we don't know if the genetics are there, which there are ways to check that, we can do the VO2 max. We can do some the box jump chest. There's various, you go to an exercise physiology lab and have these things done. Most universities have them. My undergrad university had one that we got to do these. It was really cool. And forced expiratory volume. I mean, there are multiple little genetic things. You can even have your muscle composition tested. It hurts, but you can have that done to really see. But there's always that biological component. And I think that's one of the harder things with the parents wanting their kids to go on and play in collegiate athletics at this point in time too, when they're coming to me going, well, we know they're really good and this. It's like, well, yeah, but if they're not getting looked at by D1 schools, they're not going. They're just not genetically there, and that's okay. Because really sports were just designed for kids to love to move their body and have a lifetime of activity so that we don't die soon or get, degenerative diseases. It's like, it's a whole nother leg of it beyond just like, going on to be pro and make millions of dollars. It's like, wow. And plus sometimes those individuals in the end, if they sacrifice so much to do that, they wish that they had another path, and maybe just more the typical path. And I've seen that more often than not as well. So everyone thinks that this is this, I always say like, oh, the parents have like Olympic medals in their eyes. Like they're kind of blinded by what's really going on right now and what their kid wants too. So yeah, so there's that whole aspect of genetics. Then there's that aspect of conditioning. And I think that oftentimes too, individuals think that more is better when it comes to training. And that's not necessarily the case. If we're overtraining, we're never making those gains. If we're tearing down the body is going to become too fragile over time. There's just no way that it can withhold the stress. And I remember my undergrad professor, and he was my advisor and my cross country coach, Dr. William Ledbetter. He was an interesting guy, and he'd played tennis in undergrad, but he was always about that rest and recovery was just as important, and that we will soon figure that out. And so that's what I like about like the light therapy, the cold plunges, the breath work, doing this work around calming the nervous system down and getting rid of that cortisol, because it is true that we have to rebuild as much as we tear down when we are building muscle. And with the light therapy, it enhances your recovery by 50%. So why wouldn't you be utilizing it, right? Again, I'm still that science geek of after I get done working out, I do my light therapy every day because I want to recover quicker. But yeah, so there's a lot of like not unhealthy things still within the sports culture that just aren't science-based. And then there's that whole idea that you can just push someone to this greatness. And it's like, no. But when we look at overall performance confidence, it's trusting in your training. Have you done everything? Have you checked the boxes? Is the genetic piece there? Are you doing what your coach says? Are you conditioning properly? Are you eating healthfully? Are you sleeping enough? Sleep's huge. If you're not sleeping 9 to 10 hours a night, like all these people, oh, I only need 5 hours. That's completely ridiculous. At 5 hours, it's permanent neuroinflammation in your brain. You could permanently be damaging your brain, especially if you get a concussion or hit your head, because we call it brain reserve. So going into getting a head injury, if you have less sleep, you are inflamed neurologically. So it's going to take longer to recover. So any of these athletes not sleeping that 9-10 hours, you're just setting yourself up to have a harder recovery time within around brain injury if that occurs, which oftentimes it does. I mean, it doesn't take a lot to get some inflammation in your brain. And then also at 7 hours, it takes 3 days to recover from that because the detoxing is not taking place. The neurotransmitters are not restoring. It's all these not great things. And then at 8 hours, you're restoring your neurotransmitters and you're able to do that detoxing. It's that tau protein we talk about with CTE. We have to detox that tau protein every night too. And we want to be sleeping between 10 and 2. 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. is when we do our biggest detox. And so there's a lot around that too with high performers where they just think like, well, I only need 4 hours of sleep. It's like, that's absolutely not true. No. It's like, that's just not what we know in brain science now. And we only know about 10% of what the brain is capable of. And if you guys want to follow neuroscience news every day, you are going to get the best research out of the world around neuroscience. And it's fabulous. I just geek out on it every single day. And then adding studies into my training. It's awesome.
You had said that a lot of people's trauma responses are set in stone for the most part by the age of 7. That's that's super, super early. Do you think that a lot of, and this is like, and I like how you alluded to this as well, that a lot of maybe baseball, soccer, gymnastics, you get these parents with like the medals in their eyes, the stars in their eyes for their kids. And maybe they give them kind of like that quote unquote, like punishment of getting angry with them if they strike out or if they don't perform well. And the kids grow up with this trauma response before the age of 7. If they end up being successful, get to the minor leagues, the major leagues, are they much more inclined to have the yips, to get in their own heads, deal with like depression and that sort of thing?
Yes, because they're already queued up in a trauma response. Fawning is a trauma response. So coaches yelling at an athlete or looking to see how a coach is going to respond to determine if you did a good job, that's fawning. And so you start to see that's one that we have to go into as athletes for survival in some respects. So an athlete is going to be more prone to that compared to, and I guess in a system, because this is a system, sports are a systemic part of society. So it's just like with schools too. So the kid that's getting yelled at all the time in kindergarten or whatever, they start to fawn and think, oh man, is the teacher mad at me? I better stop doing that. Oh, so it's the same thing with coaches. And so it just adds in another layer. So we have coaches, then we have parents, and it creates another environment for that good, all bad mentality. And that's why they didn't start sports back in the 50s until the age, like middle school, the age of 12, because they didn't want kids to put their worth and value around good or bad with sports. And so what happened though is after World War II and, we started coming back from the recession or whatever, depression, Pop Warner football was still on the scene. So the rich kids could still play sports, and all the other, intramural sports or whatever didn't exist, because at that time they had to even stop professional sports because of finances and men being gone and all that. But nonetheless, so it's kind of created this unhealthy sociological, which if we already knew back in the 40s and 50s that it wasn't healthy psychologically, that's kind of interesting that now here we are, like, they're 3 years old, let's put them on skis. I start skiing at 4. It's like, yeah, throw them out there. This is safe. But it's just not that healthy to create this all or nothing perfectionist mindset that young and start fawning and trying to read energetically mom and dad's response to you and coach's response to you. And then that explosive, reaction is kind of in training in that trauma response of, if I'm not perfect, if I'm not all good, if I mess up, I'm going to get hurt and punished. And then if you cry, oh boy, you gotta stop that crying, be tough, It's like, so then you learn a double whammy of emotions are not okay. I can't have emotions. So that shuts you down, and that teaches you then that beyond that fawn response, then you start getting into a fight response. Then you start getting into that frozen response. That's yips, frozen. You can't even get mentally, you're disconnected completely. Your body is completely shut down. Yips are an interesting thing to treat, because you really just go back to early childhood and work your way forward with any stressful traumatic event. And usually 9 times out of 10, it has to do with a father or a coach or a team at one point in time. And it could have just been one team. I've seen often that it was just like one travel ball team at one point in time. And then here they are at like 25. And that was still, even if their dad was great, mom and dad were supportive, weren't this all or nothing, reactive environment. It was just that one travel team that they finally quit and got on another team. But that much damage was done to the nervous system. And then when the pressure's on to compete, again, the cortisol's triggering that past experience and the body just shutting down and freezing and be like, oh my gosh, don't hurt me. And plus little kids, it's like, think about how scary it really is, like this adult like screaming at them. And as in the adult mind, when you're sitting here reprocessing the things, you're thinking, oh yeah, he's yelling at me and stuff. It's like, I have people really go in there in their parts work, as we say in that part, and go, describe to me what that 7-year-old looked like, standing there with this big guy towering over you. It's like, is that how you would treat a 7-year-old? They're kind of like, no, I wouldn't scream at him. Like, that's scary. That's awful. I'd never walk up to a little kid and start yelling at him. It's like, okay, just imagine how scary that was for that little kid. They couldn't run. They couldn't get safety. Mom and dad were behind the fence or couldn't even come to practice. It's like you were there all alone. You had to deal with it yourself. And all you could do is just shut down and get through. So, it's that kind of reaction. Yeah. And that's what happens. And that's why I think that, oftentimes we talk about athletes, whatever, right? Even just going up to the high school level, becoming really high performers and business individuals and perfectionists. And it's that kind of fight response that you start to shift to after that fawning and that frozen kind of response of like, uh-oh, coach is mad. But then you just start to push. You start to fight. You're like, oh, they said I can't succeed. I'm going to do it. And so it's like, but over time, it's not sustainable. So it's like, and that's why I like work with high performers, athletes, retired athletes. It's just fun because we do about 10 sessions. We reset your nervous system. We teach the brain to release these things and release in the current reality. Because that's the thing. We have to reteach the nervous system. So that's the performance neurotraining aspect of things when we go through these sessions to process and experience and release emotions in the moment. And so I'm teaching athletes the whole time, and that's why they don't work with me forever, is that you throw your sounds on, because these sounds that drop you in that I have, they're binaural, bilateral frequencies. And you're going, okay, the coach just yelled at me. Where do I feel that in my body? Let's release it. And so we teach the nervous system to stay in this flexibility and not get stuck on again, because it's just not how our nervous system works. So we have to train it to do differently, to do what the healthy thing is. And it happens in interpersonal relationships too. I can't tell you how many like really high performing doctors and lawyers and really tech CEOs and stuff that I've worked with around their interpersonal relationships, and they're still in that fight response trying to have an intimate relationship. I'm like, dude, this worked with business. This worked with this. It's not going to work here. And so we have to teach that, like, okay, I'm feeling this way and this is what's going on, but this person's not necessarily like, the coach screaming at me from the past or whatever. So it's really interesting to get people to get in touch with their emotions and be able to process through them and work through them in the moment. And that's what's healthy. And then go back to that balanced point and not stay stuck on and pissed off for like 3 weeks and can't sleep. And yeah.
Do you think that resiliency is unsustainable then?
I think that resilience occurs from the stressors and traumas, but we have to get out of the trauma response we get stuck in from resilience. So you can still maintain resiliency by resetting the nervous system and releasing the past charges and resetting this trauma memory network, because we deactivate the trauma memory network. So after you reprocess something, it no longer is triggering. You literally, like, I had this woman, it was the coolest thing. It was years ago when I first started. She got hit on her bike and flew like 50 feet and landed. And the first time we went through the traumatic experience, because that was like one isolated traumatic experience, right? You can do this work around that. She would barely tell me what happened. It was so, dysregulating, as we'd say. I mean, she broke her femur. Just horrific accident, right? And so I kept telling her, I said, well, we'll keep going through this, because you just keep going through it. You keep overloading and reprocessing the experience till it gets completely, the entire memory network's opened. And which is shocking to people too, because you start to remember things like the last session we did about 15 sessions. She remembered what the bumper looked like that hit her. I mean, that much memory can be unlocked, but you have to unlock and desensitize and reprocess and then re-imprint the entire memory, or else it stays charged subconsciously in our nervous system. And so I kept telling her, like, you're going to be laughing at this someday. You're going to, and absolutely, you are. You're going to go, okay, well, yeah. And then I hit that, and I remember seeing the gray bumper, and I remember seeing this, and then this happened, and then I called my husband, and da-da-da-da. The whole memory is opened up. But you get to the point where there's no more activation and no more charge around a cortisol negative experience, and then it's just a positive flat experience. It doesn't bother you anymore. And so we call it like squeezing the lemon. There's no more juice left. There's no more tears left. And my job is really to try to get you to cry, because it's actually like a healing mechanism. And so every time an athlete, I get them to cry, they're like, you got me. And I'm just like, yeah, I know. Because it's the body's way of resetting, right? So we release cortisol when we cry. It's the negative ions that flush over us. So crying is really healing. It's really resetting for that nervous system biochemically. So the whole idea is to get you to cry initially, to release that charge, to release that cortisol. And then when we talk about, like, emotion waves, it's like we can sit in here in this rationalization and reasoning and picking it apart and frustration forever. And then we get to kind of the anger, and then we have to get to that grief and that resolve to release what experience, like what the true emotions were around it. It's kind of like the subconscious act of driving. So someone cuts you off. What do you do right away? Oh, that jerk, you get all angry. That's not the reality of what just happened. What just happened is it scared you. You could have gotten hurt. You could have, got seriously injured. You could have gotten into a car accident, which would have cost money and all these things. So instead of getting angry at that, you need to turn back into yourself and be like, wow, my heart's racing. I feel that in my stomach. I don't want to get another car accident. I've been in car accidents. It's a terrible situation. That was awful. So it's like, it's the reality is fear. It's not necessarily this anger. And then even if it was bad enough that you had to slam on your brakes and go off to the corner and stuff, it's like, yeah, maybe all the way through to the fear, to the kind of crying of like, holy cow, it's like, that was terrifying. That could have ruined my whole life at this moment. Wow, I could have went off the bridge, for crying out loud. It's like, it's something like that. And so people really need to start to realize that we need to process our emotions fully, not stuff them and instantly project them, right? And so when we talk about like projection, you hear this all the time with all the psych terms on all the social media platforms anymore. They're projecting on me. It's like, projecting is exactly that. Like, oh my gosh, I'm scared. That guy almost cut me off. I could have died. It's like going, you jerk. Yeah, you are. You're projecting this energetic experience onto anger to that person, when actually it was fear and like, oh my gosh, that could have really caused me harm. That was awful. I didn't want that to occur to me. So it's that kind of dynamic. And you see that with coaches too. They'll be all like frustrated, and then they'll project on the best player on the team, always like, you have potential, so I treat you harder. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is insane. Like, that's not how we work. It's like, you should actually be very supportive and kind, and especially when you're getting triggered, get into yourself and you're like, wow, I'm worried that we're going to lose and that this is going to suck for my career and I don't want to lose my job and I'm doubting my abilities as a coach, and like really getting into your own shadow work, as we say. Where's this coming from? My dad telling me I would be nothing, or me not making it to the majors, and here I am coaching in the minors. Like, this is all my stuff. It's not actually that this kid that could go to the major league, I need to tell him that he sucks. Yeah.
You had brought up this idea of unlocking memories.
Mm-hmm.
Is there very strong ways to do that with respect to smells, sights, sounds? And like an example, and like, I mean, I'm not in the same like field, so to speak, as you, so you can speak way more on this than I can, but like, I feel like for me personally, when I smell something, it might be a cigar or mothballs, just as an example. It makes me think about like my grandparents' old
Okay.
apartment. I think about like the smell of the floor of a basketball court, and it brings me
Mm-hmm.
back to years of like I played high school basketball. And there's like some other things I smell, like a certain perfume. I think about like my like first girlfriend, like back when I was like
Oh.
17. These things, like they trigger like a cascade of memories and ideas, and I go, oh my gosh, I haven't thought about that in years. Like I was running the other day and I was getting like really tired. I was a little bit dehydrated, just going for a couple hours, and at the very end I heard this song come on my phone, and
Mm-hmm.
it brought up like the shoelace color that I was wearing while I was in like 7th grade, and it was bizarre. Like what is that? I want to get it
So
back again. I just don't know
memory,
how.
but memory is a sensory experience. So that's why when I'm dropping people in with their sounds on and we're going back to the experience, okay, when you're 7 years old and your T-ball coach was a jerk, sight, sounds, and smells, you're there right now. What do you look like? What are the smells? Like, so we actually do that, because the other aspect of that, so when we think about, okay, you've got your top skier in the world, and when they went around a corner and they felt the ice under their ski and it got wobbly, so that's when they crashed, hit their head. Okay, so they got a concussion. So they go around that corner again, or they go around any corner, and they start to feel that wobbly again. The body's going to muscle guard because it's touch, right? So when you're talking about sight, sounds, and smells and touch, yes, it's all of those things. So it can actually trigger decompensation and performance decline. One of your senses can. So if you had a bad experience at state wrestling and it smelled like popcorn in the Pepsi Center, you smell popcorn again, it can actually bring up and re-trigger a cortisol memory and make you not as, fast reaction time or whatever in your, match or whatever. So when we're desensitizing people to go into competition, we're going with all of the senses. So if I have a skier at the top of the course, I'm saying, okay, you're in the first portion of the course. What are the bad things that can go wrong? Sight, sounds, and smells. Oh, I could catch an edge. Okay, where are you feeling that catching an edge in your body? Oh my God. It's like, okay, what's the next thing that can go wrong? Oh, it can be, super slushy or whatever. It's like, okay, well, where do you feel slushiness in your body? So we desensitize around all of the sensory experience that could occur that could re-trigger that memory network. So yes, when we go back through and we process the bad experiences, we do sight, sounds, and smells. And then when we're desensitizing for performance preparation, we're going into all of the senses of what can happen preemptively going into this competition. Then we go in and we do the visualization component of the performance expansion piece of saying, okay, you've walked into the Pepsi Center, you smell popcorn, you feel the squeakiness on the, floor, the softness of the mats, like it's all of it. You hear your family, you hear people cheering, you hear people booing, you hear it all. It's going to be televised, all of those things. And so we're bringing in all that sensory experience. And then at this point, it's a positive one. You're seeing and feeling yourself. You're going out there. You're on point. You're shooting. You're doing this. You're doing that. And so you can actually desensitize against any of those sensory experiences that could cause a decomposition in the training. So yes, all memory is a sensory experience. And our eyes are the most protective, right? And if you were blind, obviously your sound and touch would be more overcompensating. So it's interesting too. People remember, well, we were drinking lemon way back in the day, Gatorade or whatever. When I work with some retired guys, it was like, I remember us drinking that. Da, da, da. It's pretty funny because you think back to like, yeah, Gatorade, just like 3 flavors. But yeah, so it was just like those kinds of things absolutely matter. And like I said, they tremendously matter when it comes to fully reprocessing and desensitizing and then getting into that performance expansion piece. It's all just a sensory experience. And what's interesting too is that we cover one eye or the other. So this was some of David Grann's work around brain spotting, is that if we cover one eye and I have someone go through the experience of this, concussion, and then I have them cover the other eye and go into the same experience, they'll remember different aspects. So one eye rationalizes or reasons an experience. One eye will be sometimes with one eye, an individual will cry, or their eye will just water, or their body will start shaking compared to the other eye. It's really interesting when fully releasing and reprocessing an experience, why that matters with covering one eye or the other.
Are some people more attuned to one of the senses than another?
I would say so, yes. But I would say, like, as athletes, though, if you think about it, like, visual and physical is going to be pretty strong. So it's always that, like, what's the, if they're playing on regular grass or something too, right? When it comes to NFL players, it's just like, oh, it's going to be regular, it's going to be slick. It's like, yeah, okay, where do you feel that slickness in your body? You're not going to be it's going to be snowing or raining or something. It's like a lot of those things really matter. Lacrosse too, it's really bad. That's when you get your knee injuries, right? In the wet grass.
Do you find that it would be helpful for probably a lot of people, even if they're not an athlete, to dive back into those memories that they didn't know were in there, just to have an understanding of who they are? And as an example, like I hang out with I see like my students who are maybe freshmen, sophomores in college, they're like 18, 19, 20. And I'm like, okay, like maybe you haven't thought about like this whole big picture yet. And that's fine because you're kind of a kid. And then like when I hit like 25, 26, I went, okay, I've had enough life experiences. I've lost all my grandparents at this point. I lost an aunt and uncle, almost lost my mom. And I was like, I've had some beautiful friends, have had some relationships fail. And I'm like, okay, I can now kind of look back on 25, 26 years. And there's like these little pieces along the way that I'm like, I kind of need to revisit this. And for me personally, like walking, running, lifting weights, like doing something very vigorous, getting my heart rate up and sweating just helps me think about these little things. And sometimes I need to wear a specific shirt, listen to a podcast, listen to an audiobook that I used to like to kind of get me back in there. And I go, that's why I keep thinking about that. It's like a deep dive, which is helping me kind of heal. What do you think about that sort of thing for most people who have this pent up energy and frustration and trauma?
Well, I mean, I think everyone needs to, because it's like anything else with expansive work, right? It's kind of like, okay, so if you've like trained physically all this time, and then maybe you should start doing myofascial release, like a massage. You know what I mean? That's how I kind of see it as when it comes to, it's great. You train well, you eat well, you sleep well, great. But maybe you need like to go in a little deeper and like release some of these like knots that you've created. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of how I see doing this reprocessing work, as well as it just decreases overall cortisol. There's a lot of literature anymore coming out with unprocessed, unresolved past traumas in it, making you more susceptible to autoimmune diseases, especially women. They say like with their unprocessed emotions causing like chronic fatigue and these things. But I definitely, if we get even more in the like energy psych world of if we look like Ayurvedic medicine, even like Eastern medicine around like the chakras. And so each chakra is associated with, or neuroenergy center is associated with different organ systems and different emotions. And if those emotions are imbalanced or not released or not accessed, or there isn't enough of like, sadness. I've had men come in and women come in and be like, I haven't cried for 20 years. I'm just like, whoa, because that's just, crying is healthy. We need to cry. We need to experience the full range of emotions. And so it's that when we start looking at those things, emotions are healthy. We need them flowing. And when we look at these organ systems, it's like there's oftentimes when people have like a lot of repressed anger or something like that, that's like intestines, and you're sitting here looking at an individual going, yeah, I just got diagnosed with irritable bowel and ulcerative colitis, and this, and my dad was really harmful to me as a child and beat me and this and this. I'm like, whoa, okay, there's kind of a correlation here with some of this anger and stuff that has not been processed. And so really going back in, like, how'd that make that 7-year-old feel when dad used to beat him up and throw him in the bedroom, you know? It's like, so trying to reprocess those things. And then of course that overall cortisol, that if we're ramped up and we just have an overabundance of cortisol, it's going to be negatively impacting our health. And then the other thing that we know about the brain science with these reprocessing techniques at this point in time, and that's why there's a lot of research going on with the psychedelics. And it's like, I like the plant medicine, but you can do this with sounds as well. And I'm not like, you know, telling people, oh, that's bad and wrong. But I know a lot of people are hesitant to do those things. And so you don't have to do those things that way. You can do them with sounds, and you can work with a very skilled individual that's actually doing this work around that very specifically, not just basic psychotherapy. It's going to be an individual that's doing this trauma work. And that's all we're talking about here. But there's also that aspect of, you know, the amygdala becomes hypervigilant. And so you really see with individuals over and over again that they have a very fearful, negative view of reality. And then the more you work, then our hippocampus, which is our kind of resourcing, replaying the memory like a movie in your eye, as a movie in your brain, as you're experiencing the moment, it becomes larger. So we actually have more blood flow going to the hippocampus, less to the amygdala. So we know that happens over time when we're doing these trauma reprocessing techniques. And so people start to see their current reality as more positive. And everyone's really experienced that. I mean, like, even just this last summer was stressful. Both my grandparents died, my dog died. And so I was like, wow, how sad, you know? And it was just like, it was hard to get out of that grief. And of course, I've done so many healing things and just got back from a retreat in Tulum. But it's like, you have to work to get out of that, because it's like, it's very hard in the moment to just be like, oh, I have no motivation. I'm just going to sit here and think about my dog that passed, you know, and be in this kind of grief, cuddled up tunnel, you know. And it's like, so thinking about it that way, that it's just like, yeah, well, you have to kind of reset your nervous system after these negative things occur to get back into that higher level of energy going to the hippocampus, back into, like I was saying before, these positive frequency, because it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to grieve, but it's not okay to just stay stuck there and never do anything about it. It's just like health. It's like if you get yourself to a point of very unhealthful, lots of diseases, morbidly obese, it's like, well, you know, it's like that happens, I guess, but let's go ahead and do the things to get yourself back to health, because it's not anyone else's responsibility. It's yours. And so just kind of thinking about it that way. So, and then you see that with, like, you know, no one wants to be in an intimate relationship with someone who's sees the world in a negative light. So thinking about that too, it's like, okay, I've had all these negative things happen. I've succeeded. I'm here at my corporate job. I'm having a hard time dating. What's going on here? It's like, well, maybe we should kind of reset your nervous system from all the difficult things that have happened to get you where you are, and then kind of open the door to, and you end up with what you put up with. There, you know, when we talk about this energy vortex, the quantified field, you're going to attract. Skaver Mate, he's a medical doctor that talks about trauma and these reprocessing techniques. And he talks about, you're going to attract an individual that is at the level of wounded, essentially, that you are. So it's kind of interesting when you start looking at intimate relationships, because everyone wants love, everyone wants to be loved. And it's like, maybe you should do your work so you're not attracting someone who's very wounded on this subconscious level. And then you two are going to be, you know, having it out all the time about, like, oh, you're not doing what I needed from my mom or dad, and da da da. It's kind of a dance you start playing, and that's what we call trauma bond, right? So thinking about that as well, because I do see a lot of high performers that have had a hard time with love. And so that's kind of where that comes from. It's like, no, you want to reprocess all these things and heal the things that you didn't get from your parents, which is trauma too. So going back through, what did that child need instead of what they got, to be able to attract that person that is ready for love, just like you.
No, it's funny that you brought that up, that idea of trauma bonding, because I was gonna like ask you about that, because like one of the things that you had brought up earlier on when we were speaking was this idea of, you have this energy field of upwards of 25 feet, And one of my, I don't know, personal goals for my life, and I don't know if I'll achieve it or not, is I've known probably two or three people over the past 30 years who, like, when you are in a room with that person, everyone lights up. Everyone
Mm-hmm.
feels loved.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone feels heard and seen. And it's just like, you don't want to not be around that person. Even when even when they're in your thoughts, you smile and you feel comforted. And that's my goal for
Mm-hmm.
my life, is like, I want to be that person for my family and friends, that when I come into a room, they're like, okay, it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And you have so many like energy vampires out there who, unbeknownst to them, or maybe they're trying to do it, they just bring down your energy so down that it's just a drag being with them. And I'm like, how do I either stay away from those people, or how could I lift them up if they want to be lifted up? And maybe that's their ordeal. Maybe they don't want to be helped. Maybe they want to sit there and wallow and be a drag to be around.
That's that's a big lesson that you have to learn, is like boundaries, especially as like an empath or energetic person. So if people are not willing to do the work, you have to walk away from them. And that's something that's been hard for me as being like a healer and an empath, is that you think that subconsciously maybe that you can, and in some level, you know, I've had individuals, even individuals I've dated, that have had a lot of past traumas, like their health has increased just by being around me and all this kind of stuff. But it got to a point where I started to feel so drained. I was like, I can't do this anymore. This person's never gonna, you know, they got sciatica and they won't do yoga. I don't know what to do with this person. You know, I'm just done. Right. So it's just like that kind of thing where you're just feeling like, okay, I can't give anymore. Because what's going to happen is if you continue to get drained, like you said, you're not going to be at your optimal frequency to be there for the individuals that are welcoming and wanting you to help elevate them. So it's been a pattern in my life of friends and everything else, that it's like, oh yeah, people like being around me, but I don't really want to be around them all the time. So it's really picking your tribe and your community too. And that's what's really cool in LA. We've got some cool communities here, and it's really the like a conscious expansion type of communities that I hang out with here. We've got our Grateful Giraffe group, where it's like the biggest heart of any land mammal is a giraffe. So we're like grateful, gratitude, because those things matter. It's like you want to feel good all the time. When individuals work with me, it's like it's an energy that I'm setting the tone, that because they're in my energy field, and it's like I need to be as clean and healthy as possible. And the other thing is that you know, the more that you're bringing yourself up solo, you're bringing other people up. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be friends with them, engage with them, try to help them be in their energy field. Just as a collective, the higher frequency people get, the more people that get to this higher frequency, and Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about it a lot at some of his events, is that we are all just kind of bringing everybody up. So it's not about just like sacrificing yourself to hang out with this person and try to motivate them all day, every day to do better. That's only going to hurt you, and it's only going to bring you down, and it's not actually helping the collective. And so I'm always like, okay, you know, universe, send me the individuals that are ready to do what I have to offer, essentially. Not necessarily that, yeah, just want to be in my energy field and like how they feel when they're around me. And I think that the cleaner you get, you're going to get presented kind of with these challenges. And so like really like at your age, you've really done well with your physical health and all this. So, and that's a good vibratory pattern already, right? So that's biophoton communication, that's blood flow, that's, you know, you're already at a pretty high vibe, but it's like start bringing in some of these brain training techniques. And I love Joe Dispenza's meditations, and start hanging around and going to some events, local events of like your biohackers, your conscious individuals, and really start to see yourself like rise up more, and keeping yourself around individuals that are in that mindset. And, you know, and that's why I really like, you know, when you look at sports, it's like my dream is that we really start to introduce some of this into the sports culture, and we get these athletes that are not working from this like punishment, fawning, awful, punitive way, because they can only thrive like immensely, and then their modeling and the impact on the world can be so tremendous because these individuals are in such big stages, and they already, like I said, they're vibrating at such a high frequency just from energetically, and their nervous system being so advanced. And so if anything, I want this big shift into this quantum physics of understanding and expansive consciousness, and no more of this, oh, we're partying, let's go out and get like alcohol poisoning. It's like, what are we doing here? It's like, let's go out and like have a cool dance party and, just something like that. But yeah, that's my hope for sports culture, and I guess culture in general. But yeah, there's a way to keep, I don't know, expanding all of our frequency and into that enlightenment in light, right?
Yeah, that's the goal, is going towards light and away from darkness.
Yes.
This was fantastic. Thank you for coming on and answering so many of my questions today. Where can people find out about you and all the great things that you do?
Oh, I've got my website. It's robertsneurotraining.com. And it's actually being remade into having some more quantum physics things, because my website's about 12 years old now. So I'll be excited for people to be able to check out some of these concepts that I've talked about. And I do the alpha imprinting training for other coaches, sports psychs, and individuals just wanting to work with others around being able to reset the nervous system and get individuals into optimized energy. And all my socials are at Sports Psych Paige. I'm not super active on there because I'm busy working, but I'm trying to put more out there to inspire others.
Awesome. I'll link all of that down in the description. Again, Dr. Roberts, thank you for coming on today. This has been brilliant.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Sure.